So let's take a look at lipids in general. There is a molecule that goes by the name of glycerol. It's 3 carbons long, has hydroxyl groups. So it's just 3 carbons. It's real simple. It's a simple molecule. 3 carbons long, 3 OH groups. These things are known as fatty acids. Let me be clear. I told you this, about a month ago. You've been quizzed on this already. Lipids are long chains of what? Long chains of what 2 elements? Lipids are made mostly of carbon and hydrogen. Carbon and hydrogen. I've said this for a month. I've quizzed you on it, told you need to know it. So carbon and hydrogen. That's what lipids are made mostly of. That's it. There's some oxygen in it. Some lipids have phosphorus. Phospholipids from the previous slide is one of those lipids that have phosphorus in it. But glycerol has 3. What do you see? You see an OH. What does that mean to you if you see an OH? What are you thinking? Knowing how you put biomolecules together. What might you think? Hydrogen bond is a possibility. That's good. But putting things together, what have you seen us do over and over again in putting these biomolecules together, putting these polymers together?
Make water.
Making water. Dehydration synthesis or condensation reactions. So we're going to do it again. We're going to do condensation. Now this is not a monomer. This is not fats. Write that down because this is the only macromolecule that is not a polymer. These are not polymers. We don't do polymers with lipids. Because with the other structures we've looked at, amino acids and nucleotides, they form polymers. They form long chains. RNA, DNA, and polypeptides all form long chains of repeating subunits. There is no repeating subunit here. So let's be clear on that. But we still do dehydration synthesis. We can take OH here and the H here, and we can form what? Water. So we can take OH and H, OH and H, OH and H, and they form water, and then these 2 can get connected. The oxygen to the carbon to the oxygen, repeatedly, the carbon to the oxygen, the carbon to the oxygen. So you get this repeated connection. We call this a triglyceride. This is one of the things that's flowing through your blood right now. Every time you eat a hamburger, you're releasing these. You're releasing them into your bloodstream. You're digesting, you're bringing them into your body. Triglycerides is one of the things doctors measure in your blood to see how healthy what your long-term heart health is. Your parents get these numbers every time they go to the doctors and get blood work. Please close the door. These are called triglycerides. These are fatty acids, which are repeating units of what? Carbon and what? Carbon and hydrogen. Carbon and hydrogen. There is some oxygen here in the beginning, right here in the middle, helping connect everything together. Okay? You see it here. Oxygen connecting these together with a double bond O sticking up. This is called the triglyceride. What is this? When 2 lines come together and there's no symbol, what's at the center here? Carbon. And the other things that are not shown are hydrogen. So carbon and hydrogen. These are all carbon and hydrogen, carbon and hydrogen. Long chain of carbon and hydrogen. These are why we know they're lipids. Are we clear? Mostly carbon and hydrogen. Carbohydrates are going to be carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen. Nucleotides have nitrogen, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, right? Protein and phosphorus. Proteins have carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, hydrogen, and what? Not phosphorus, but what? Sulfur, right? So remember that. Some of these lipids might have a phosphorus, but most of it is going to be carbon and hydrogen. Yeah?
So they alternate between hydrogen and...
Right, it's just carbon. Look at it. It's carbon connected to two hydrogens connected. So each carbon's going to have 4 bonds. So this carbon's going to be connected to this carbon. It's going to be connected to this carbon. What are the other 2 bonds connected to? Hydrogen. This carbon's connected to 2 carbons, one here, one here. What are the other 2 bonds? Hydrogen. So unless there's an oxygen present, you'll see the O for oxygen. These are all carbon-hydrogen bonds. Now, you've heard of saturated and unsaturated. Is that correct? Yes? Anybody not here of saturated or unsaturated? Okay, not seeing any hands, assuming people are participating, even those of you that are staring off and having side conversations. Do you feel my eyes burning in a hole in your soul? No? You should, because I'm staring dead at you. So except for you two, it's not seeing any. I'm going to go ahead and assume that you've all heard of, you have not heard. Thank you for finally sharing. So, oh, you had your hand up? Oh, I didn't see it. You were very quiet. So saturated and unsaturated. Saturated is bad. So saturated fatty acids are bad. What you'll hear is saturated fat. Unsaturated is good. All right. So things like what's examples of saturated fat? Butter, animal fat, the gristle on a steak, etc. What's the example of unsaturated fat? Olive oil, corn oil, what do you notice about saturated fat? What do you notice about these two, this group of fats versus this group of fats? Well, that's true. You're going to get a lot of unsaturated fats from vegetables. That's true. You can't get saturated. There are saturated fats in vegetables as well, so be careful with that. Don't make that assumption one way. What do you notice about these? Say again? Yeah, these are oils. What does oil mean to you? What is it? What's the difference between animal fat and butter versus olive oil and corn oil? Yeah. Is what now?
Saturated fats, all the is compound
All right. I'm not sure I understand you, but we'll go ahead and move on to someone else, okay? Just because you're saying saturated fat is what now?
It's nothing compound, it's natural.
Oh, natural? No, these are natural too. You have a lot of saturated fat. If you eat a steak, there's a lot of saturated fat in it. It's natural. Saturated is natural. It's usually associated with animal fat, but there are some plants that produce saturated fats, and certainly butter is from milk, right? It's a fat found in milk. Yeah.
It's a solid at room temperature?
Yeah. Excellent. Wow, that's pretty cool. Very rarely do people notice that. That's right. So this is solid at room temperature. So think about it. Butter, in fact, people will leave, it used to be people would leave butter in the tray on the table with a little cover. They had a little butter tray, they'd leave it outside in the refrigerator so it gets soft. But even though it's soft, it's still solid, right? Olive oil, corn oil is all liquid at room temperature. It turns out that this impacts the chemistry of things. And so when we're looking at these fats, what happens is you're looking at what we call a saturated fat. They look like this. All of the bonds, all the carbons have either carbon or hydrogen. All of them have carbon or hydrogen. In an unsaturated fat, what you find is there's a double bond to another carbon. And sometimes you have polyunsaturated, which means you have more than one double bond. That double bond, I drew this poorly because what I should draw, what happens is a double bond is shorter than the long bond, than a single bond, so that the molecule twists. And so you get a kind of a kink in the molecule. Remember the shape and function thing? So that changes the function. So in unsaturated fats, when you put a bunch of them together, they push each other away. So there's more space between them. Why is there more space? Because they're kinked. They got kinks in them. Where the saturated ones all line up together. They form kind of a much denser fat. And so they can form a solid. So that's why butter is a solid, because butter has these bonds, all the carbons, they make these straight lines, and the straight lines can get packed tightly together. Where oils, they tend to be liquids because they're spread out more because they have the kink in them. So this is actually should be better drawn. It should show a kink in it as well. But this is a double bond, that's a double bond, that's a double bond. This is polyunsaturated. And this is monounsaturated. This is the best. Now, it turns out if you have polyunsaturated, every time you have a double bond, your body processes it differently, does different kinds of chemical reactions to get to the energy. So because of that, these saturated fats, they tend to form plaques in your arteries, what we call arteriosclerosis. And so they could actually cause heart disease and peripheral artery disease. So these saturated fats, we think, are not very good for you. The worst is trans fats, which we'll look at later. But these molecules, the difference between saturated and unsaturated fatty acids is very important for your health. You see the kink? So you see, because this is all saturated, see how they all have hydrogens? They're saturated, it's a straight line. This is a space-filling model, it's all filled in. When you have a double bond here, because of the double bond, the molecule actually looks like this. See the kink? So that means that these, you try to pack these together, there's more space between them. So they tend to be liquid at room temperature. So things like olive oil and corn oil and such are liquid at room temperature. All right. Please don't, just because I'm explaining it, don't assume you don't have to read it. By reading it, you get a deeper understanding. If there's writing on a page, you should have at least read it, even if I went over it in class. Honestly, as I keep saying to you, you should read it before you come to class. It's good practice. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Actually, no. Let's wait till the hallway's clear, if you wouldn't mind. All right, so there are some steroids. Steroids are also lipids, and we've talked about those. There's a steroid that's known as cholesterol. That's a steroid. You've heard of cholesterol? These are all lipids. You've heard of testosterone? You've heard of estrogen? I'm not going to draw it for you. I'm not going to have you memorize the structure. The cholesterol is a double ring structure. Actually, testosterone and cholesterol have similar structures. They're ring structures, almost like purines or pyrimidines, but they don't have nitrogen in them. They're what? They're made of mostly what? Carbon and hydrogen. Mostly carbon and hydrogen. Not nearly as much oxygen or other things. Are we good? All right, so you should be able to answer these, and you should be able to tell what are steroids used for. That's right. So there's two kinds of steroids. So let's go ahead and talk about that. Because there's two things we do with biomolecules. What do we do with macromolecules? There's two things we do. You can either what or what with macromolecules. Besides use them, right? Besides using them. We can... What do we do with them? What have we been doing with them for all week? For about a week now. What do we do with them? Macromolecules. Huh? Okay, eat them, but what do you have to do if you eat them? What do you do with them? Well, of course, that's just rephrasing it. What do you got to do with macromolecules? To get a macromolecule, you have to get a polymer, you have to build them. Yes, so you build them. You build them. If you're building them, we call these anabolic. So anabolic steroids, what they do is they encourage what? Encourage what? Muscle growth. Right? You're encouraging anabolic steroids. What they do, among other things, is they encourage you to build muscle, do more, put more amino acids together, form more protein. That's what you do. That's what you're doing. But there's a second thing that you can do with them, and we all know this. So this would be what? This would be condensation, right? What's the other thing we do with macromolecules? This is dehydration synthesis, same thing. Right? Dehydration synthesis, same thing. So what is the other thing you do? Condensation, what do you do? So we build them or we break them down. Look at your notes. This is stuff you should be reciting, should have on index cards. You've already been quizzed on this. You know you have a makeup quiz coming up, or a retake coming up tomorrow after school. You should know this. This is stuff I got to know this. Hydrolysis is correct. So this is hydrolysis. Breaking it down using water. Building it up. This is building it up using water. This is breaking it down using water. So what's breaking down called? It's not anabolic, it's called catabolic. Encourage what? Breaking down. So these two steroids are used as signals, right? Either you're breaking down, you're speeding up, you're building up your macromolecules, or you're breaking them down. Steroids give you that information. Warning. Any one of these steroids, they're also called hormones. They're hormone. Not all hormones are steroids. Insulin is a protein, but it's a hormone, all right? Hormones in general are signaling molecules. They signal. So these are called signaling molecules. Both proteins and lipids can be used in this way. What does signaling mean? Telling it to do something, right? It's information. So they're like, okay, do this, right? Now the problem is there are different ways of signaling. You can tell someone directly, you can call someone, right? I can call you on the phone and tell you, go here and do this. That's very specific, right? Or I could just pull the fire alarm. If I pull the fire alarm, that's pretty general. Some people will go outside. Some people will scream and knock other people over. Other people will just sit there and say, I don't really want to go downstairs, it's just a drill, right? So there's a bunch of people that are different, they're going to do different things depending on how they're going to react to the signal, because it's a general signal. Yeah, it's a bell, it's ringing. Okay, how are we going to react to that? So hormones are general signals. Why do I even mention this? Because testosterone and other anabolic steroids don't just build muscle. They signal all kinds of things that happen. These are like ringing the bell in a school. Who knows what's going to happen? Depends on the tissue. All right? So in your muscles, yeah, your muscles will grow. What happens to other parts of your body? It might stimulate cancer to grow. It might stimulate heart disease. Once you stop, it might stimulate, for instance, while you're taking them for your testicles to shrink if you're a male. It might stimulate for your breasts to grow if you're a male after you stop using them. Breasts to grow, not fatty deposits. It could change how you feel. You get what's called roid rage. It actually impacts your brain, your thinking. There's a thing called roid rage. Have you ever heard it? Roid because of steroids. Roid rage. A rage that people get upset and they lose their temper easily and they tear things apart because the steroids are impacting how they feel, how irritable they are. So hormones are general stimulants. That's why you've heard of PMS, premenstrual syndrome. A woman's cycle is regulated by hormones. Her hormones are, once that egg starts to release hormones, it doesn't just do one thing. It doesn't just start to build the uterus up for implantation. It also impacts her mood. It might impact her mood. It might swell up her ankles. It might, who knows what it does. It depends on the person and how that person reacts to the general signal called the hormone. That's why every individual female could react differently depending on how much of the signal they get and how their body's going to react to that signal. Males also have hormones. We have estrogen. We have testosterone. Normally in our bloodstream. How much do we produce? How do we react to it? It all depends. So these are general signals, not specific. Your brain thinking, you choosing to move your hand to write, those are specific signals that your body sends in a different way. But hormones are general flags or bells ringing that your body reacts to in a different way than other people might. So remember that. And be careful, gentlemen, especially gentlemen, but women as well. Women take steroids as well, anabolic steroids to build their muscles illegally, competition, etc. I'm going to tell you this. It's not about being against the rules. It's about it impacting your health. You don't know what this stuff's going to do. It can cause cancer. So anabolic steroids should not be taken. Heart disease, lung disease, all kinds of things.